other organizations and legacy institutions to pay attention to women in journalism, their challenges, and what they do. Before Kiran's initiative launching the Press Freedom Newsroom, there was no systematic data for women targeted for their work. Kiran also occasionally serves as a judge for prestigious global journalism awards such as Rory Peck Awards and One World Award. We also have with us the very amazing Ghada Oueiss. Ghada is a broadcast journalist with over 2 decades of experience. Ghada is the principal presenter at Al Jazeera, specialized in running tough investigative interviews and has covered several political stories, also from conflict areas and war zones. She has unfortunately also been targeted and attacked online for her work as a journalist. In a mid 2020 Washington Post opinion piece, Ghada described hackers stealing private photos and videos from her phone and posting them online, which resulted in sharp escalation of online attacks on her, including suspicious processes associated with NSO groups, Pegasus malware on her iPhone. But none of this has stopped her from doing her job and demanding those responsible for these attacks to be held accountable. Ghada and Kiran, you both continue to inspire us with your bravery and your courage and the amazing work that you both are doing. So thank you so much. It's a privilege and an honor to have you join us today on the Sania Farooqui Show.
Thank you, Sania. Thank you, and likewise.
Thank you so much. So, Ghada, I'm going to start today's discussion with you. What we've seen happen to you, targeted by trolls and harassed, and it has gone on for a very long time. You should answer and talk only if you're comfortable, but I just want to know how you've been coping and dealing with these attacks, and have they stopped over time? How do you process everything that goes on? Does that impact your work, your physical safety? Do you think there needs to be more help that needs to be given to journalists who are in a similar position like you when it comes to safely reporting and continuing to do their work?
Thank you, Sania, for inviting us to this very important discussion. And let me start with a positive point. When you ask if I had the support, I have the support from women like you and like coming from many organizations. That was the only support I had, between us, between women reporter and the organization the one we will discuss now. And but if you talk about organization, you mean the media outlets where we work. I mean, for them it's different. It's not like, because they are focused on the job to be done, on the news itself. I don't think they have done enough. The organization all over the world, not only in the Middle East, but even also in India or in Philippines, or let's say even in the United States or in Europe. But I don't think in Europe it's less, they are less bullied. I don't know. I think it's less. There are women, of course, even they are bullied. But if you talk about organizations, they need to do more, and governments need to do more, and not all governments, because we are the victims of the governments. But when I say governments, I mean democratic governments. I mean governments who pretend that they support human rights and press freedom. And because we see lots of double standard here. And also, it should be, more should be done when it comes also to international law. It should involve also the journalists, because no one is afraid now to kill a journalist. And I'll give you 2 examples. And it's not easy for me to talk about this, because what I went through was stressful enough. And then when you think about my colleague Shireen Abu Aqil, for example, who lost her life just because she was doing her job, that was, the bottom line. That was like they say in French, it was the dernière goutte, or like we say in French, la cerise sur le gâteau. It means that was the last garniture over the cake, you know. You suffer from bully, you suffer from online violence, from harassment, but when it comes to a physical assassination like this, I think no, you cannot be okay after that. So I found out that I was trying to survive. I was telling myself that I'm fine, I'm strong. I was wearing a brave face and getting a thick skin, as they say, or as they expect us to do. But then now I feel more vulnerable with what happened to Shireen. I feel angry, vulnerable. It's you know, it's a cocktail of mixed feelings that says that finally, no, I'm not fine with this, and I'm not okay, and maybe I survived what happened with me, because it's more dangerous than what happened with Shireen. But I cannot say that I survived what happened with Shireen, my colleague, and I can say very honestly that I don't think that anything is worth losing your life. I mean, I'm ready to fight. I'm ready to speak up, to face those challenges, those threats, those horrible slurs, those horrible insults online. But when it comes to a bullet in my head, no, I'm sorry. I won't. I'm not gonna do that. I'm not gonna save the world by giving up my own life. So I have a lot of bitterness here, a lot of anger, a lot of sadness, of course. And I don't know how to fix this, because it went beyond my capacity of understanding what's happening or the strengths I already have. And if you think before Shireen, we had lost our colleague also, Jamal Khashoggi, and I paid the price of talking about the subject. I really paid very hard, from my time, from my energy, from my reputation, my family's security, the mental health, even the physical health, because when mentally you're not okay, physically you're not okay. So and despite that, I continue to do my work. But with Shireen, it was different, because she's not here anymore. And even if we talk about her every day, and this is what we are doing, nothing will get her back. And even if for us, she's a martyr. She became a symbol. But what about her? Did she want this? Did she want to have all of this? Huge funeral. Everybody's talking about her, but we don't know what she thinks about it. Maybe she just wants to live peacefully, rather than having this heroic story that ended tragically like this. So what hurts me most is that they killed her in front of the eyes of the world, and nobody did anything about it. And even Western media was sufficiently hypocrite to say a Palestinian journalist was killed, not, Israeli occupation forces killed or assassinated Shireen. I mean, not all of them, but if you look grosso modo at the coverage, even that, it's your colleague. So no, I feel very, very, very frustrated, very angry, very bitter. And I think the word did nothing to us. And when I say the word, I mean people, because we are working for people. It's a public service. And when I do my job correctly, I serve people, actually. But I don't think that people realize this as much as it should be realized, because without independent and honest journalists, those people cannot know what's happening. And the consequence of not knowing what's happening, it affects everybody's life on this earth. So if there are no good journalism, there is no good governance. There is no good governance. There's corruption. There is oppression, and the life of the life of the population will get less better. So the people didn't do anything. The organizations didn't do anything. The media companies didn't do anything. The West didn't do anything. Why do I say the West? Because the West is always pretending that they are defending press freedom, the free speech, and the human rights. But I don't feel it. It does. I never felt that I'm supported the way they pretended to say in the European Union or in the United States, where they talk every day about this. Unless, you know, it depends on the political system or on the political interests, and no, it's not. You have to read politics in order to see if you're going to be supported or not, and also you don't have the support of course, when you are attacked by a government, you'll not be supported by a government. And sometimes you're not supported by your own colleagues because they are afraid to support you. So if I tweet something in order to support Sania, for example, because she's attacked by the Indian government, I will think twice, because I do not want maybe to be associated with Sania, because the government will be upset also with me because I supported Sania. So it's very complicated. It's very annoying.
Yeah, that happens.
Very frustrating. And at all levels, I don't see the full support. The support I had was coming from people like you, Sania, like Kiran, like the organizations run. Thank God there are people like Kiran who run such organizations, because in my case, I can personally assure you that those organizations, like Women in Journalism, like IPI, like IWMF, those organizations were the real support for me, even more than anyone else that you can think of, even more than close people to you, because this support was intensely important for me, because otherwise I would find myself, you know, alone, facing 4 governments who are, you know, very violent with me online, and it could be offline. Sorry, I talked too much on this, but normally
No, that's fine. It's like what you said, and I'm going to come to Kiran, because her own journey and story has been very similar in terms of how she realized why it was important to have organizations that support women journalists. So Kiran, talking to you, we have already spoken briefly the last time you were there on Sania Farooqi's show, which was, you know, aired last year. But tell us, 2015 for you was very significant, because what happened was you moved back to New York after covering and reporting on ISIS on the front lines, and you had also lost a lot of your friends, which obviously had a huge impact on you, both personally, mentally, physically. And so tell us what happened, and why did you realize that you needed help and that there was not enough help being provided or given to women journalists who undergo what Ghada has undergone, what you underwent, and what we're seeing almost everybody go through that today?
Thank you so much, Sania, and thank you for having me. And again, and it's so nice to hear from Ghada. And I think that's something that Ghada can relate to, that Sania, you can relate to, is we have just started talking about mental health in journalism. And since it started a couple of years ago, the word PTSD, for example, post-traumatic stress disorder, this word is, you know, we started using it, and then it started being thrown around kind of recklessly as well, right? Not in the right places. And so, like, when we just start having a conversation and then we also don't know what it is, we kind of lose track of what's really happening. Stress and trauma has always affected journalists, because journalists have always been on that side, right? Like, we have always reported exposed powerful, you know, dictators or governments that are anti-democratic. Our work revolves around exposing those who are unjust. So in that role, we often obviously have had always, and we have been able to work around that, right? Until now, that we are seeing everything falling apart, the world becoming more divisive, that anti-democratic governments, states, it used to be corporations, for example, the oil and other corporations. Now it's the governments that are targeting journalists, like Ghada said earlier as well. Is that, you know, governments, what can we do about them? Can we collab with them? we can't, because oftentimes they're the culprits. So to answer your question, so I just wanted to clarify that, I think that we as an industry have just started talking, like 5-6 years is not a long time. And while we just started talking about mental health, we haven't really figured out how to address it. We haven't really built systems that are going to be there for journalists as much as they are targeted. So journalists we now do have some systems. Like, I can briefly talk about the coalition and how it came about and what we do and how we're constantly improvising. But essentially, it's important to understand that there are tens of thousands of journalists around the world, and thousands of them, women, are getting targeted on a daily basis online, or even physically. In local media, journalists get harassed every day on the street. You're in India, Sania, and there's so many rural journalists in India, Dalit journalists. If you're in Turkey, Kurdish journalists. So journalists from minorities get targeted more easily, and that affects their mental health. So the work we do as journalists or human rights defenders, in a very divisive world, in a very polarized world, the polarization of the world is a recipe for disaster when it comes to mental health, right? Do we have enough resources and infrastructure to be able to deal with that? No, we're not there yet. And that is what exactly that we need. What we need is infrastructure to resolve these problems. Briefly, the Coalition for Women in Journalism essentially came about because of, mental health challenge that I faced. And you know a little bit, Sania, I was in the hospital, and just like after spending almost 2 decades, and having a career that was, going well, I covered different parts of the world. I started different journalism initiative at universities, and after doing all of that work, when I collapsed, I realized that, we can't. If women journalists or journalists in general don't have access to resources or support systems, after having a thriving career, what are journalists who don't have that? What are they missing out on, and how will they get access to it? So that's why we started this work. And a lot of our work focuses on mental health because, even in our mental program, which, if I would briefly to describe, that also always has had a mental health element, and it came about because of that. Because when I was asking this question, like, why are women not reaching the top, or why women don't have access, why are women being harassed and don't have resources, all of those things kind of came to, we did a survey and we spoke to 101 editors and reporters in North America and Mexico, which is Canada, US, and Mexico. And Mexico, because I was going a lot there and had partnerships in newsrooms. And we found that 62% of women journalists hit a plateau after 4 to 5 years in their career. So mid-career women journalists were hitting a plateau. And that plateau, which means they won't make progress, and sometimes their careers would decline or stay here. And why was that happening? A lot of that was happening because harassment, discrimination. They were not getting the opportunities. They were discriminated. They weren't getting. Their work was being used by other male colleagues. For example, women were reporting on things, and male colleagues would take credit for their work or make them do the research and not give them the credit. So all of these things was making them hit the plateau in their career progress, but also their mental health was declining after. And we also saw that oftentimes women in this group said that they felt like they weren't as creative as they were before, which means it affected their mental health directly. So mental health, if you are not able to be yourself, mental health gets affected by that, right? And that affects your work. That affects, that is directly linked to journalism. That affects how we are able to do journalism. In a newsroom, a lot of times newsrooms brag about having women representation and all of that. And one of the reasons, that went into my logic of forming this organization was also that I saw there were a lot of women. A majority of journalism schools had women graduating from them, majority, right? I'm talking about top schools in New York, etc. And And there were a lot of newsrooms that had a lot of women in population, but they were working the night shift or working as assistants or fixers and so on, or sub-editors or copy editors. So women are there, but they're not doing the job. So that affects journalism. That discourages. Now that we have the Me Too campaign and we are talking about Black Lives Matter, we have a language to describe that discrimination and how much trauma women have had in this industry for a long time. And now with online violence, which is a completely different social phenomena that is going on, which is, I'll be happy to go into detail. But anyways, I think that mental health is very important. And that is why through our mentorship program, the mental health page, I can briefly talk about that the reason we launched the mental health page has come out after a lot of thinking and like experimenting with things and figuring out what works. And one of the key things is support systems. Without support systems, when women are getting trolled or they're physically attacked, what they need is to be able to go to somebody and talk to somebody who's going to back them up or listen to them, whether it's a private case or a public case. We need support systems for women journalists and for women to know that when they're facing mental health challenge, there are other women who have experienced that as well, and be able to share notes. So we have this blog where women journalists share their stories about resilience, how they overcame the trauma. We have tools and resources. We have downloadable resources that you can print out and put in your backpack. If you're going out reporting, you can keep those. Like these are postcards, and we have like tips and things that you can do immediately when you're facing mental health. And I would say that, a part of our mental health page or our mentorship is always to encourage journalists to meditate and journal and be able to process that stress, because this gets stored in your mind, and that needs to come out through either meditation or exercise and other things. Practices.
There's a lot that I want to talk about, but since we're trying to keep it very short and we've already run out of a lot of time, and you guys have given said a lot that I had broken down in different questions, so I'm just going to quickly jump to one very important question. What should young journalists today be prepared when they are entering the world of news, the world of journalism? Because like you said, Kiran, mental health has become something very recent. We don't even have that many organizations who support journalists when it comes to even just dealing with stress, or acknowledging that, mental health is an important factor. Now that we have a little bit time left, just 2 minutes each, guys, could you tell us what would your message be for young journalists entering today? Ghada, why don't we go back to you?
Don't enter. No, I'm joking. No, they should know what is waiting for them if they want to do, if they want to do journalism. Politics. If you are a journalist just covering Cannes, Festival de Cannes, or the Oscars in Hollywood, or just the museums and the art, that is a kind of journalism which I don't think that is too much stress, unless we're talking about the Me Too campaign. That's another subject, but it's also stressful. But from my experience, because I was always a journalist who covers political and the conflict zones and the war zones and the Middle East with all the trauma already there, I really do not recommend people who are sensitive to do this job. You have to have a certain sensitivity and a certain passion for this job. Otherwise, you'll be not happy with the results, because sometimes young people have this, enthusiasm and wanting to change the world, especially in that part of the world, which is the Middle East, with these wars going on since decades there and the conflict there. And sometimes we might think, as when we are young and we have this fresh enthusiasm, that we can make a difference. It's not that easy. You can make a difference, but you need a lot of experience, and you need many years to build this experience in order to use this experience to do a difference. And at the same time, you have to be careful just to be to keep your objectivity and to keep being, because just like Kiran said, the world is polarized now, it's divided, and that is a lethal recipe to have traumatizing ambiance around journalists. So you have to keep being or keeping your emotions not on fire, because if you take everything on your heart, that will be very, very, very tough on you, because since I was a child, I was seeing in front of me wars going on in Lebanon, because I'm Lebanese, and then in Palestine, and then the Arab Spring in 2011. It was very violent, the results after that, and the human rights violations. So every time I talk to a victim, or I see one of my colleagues being tortured or imprisoned or in jail or having death penalty, I lost colleagues. They lost their lives. I have colleagues in jail. I have colleagues who have death penalty from their governments because of their work, because of reporting the truth. So if you want a young journalist who want to cover the events and the world, and to cover, and with time you discover how politicians are either corrupted or hypocrite, or they have double standard, and if you are sensitive and you take this on your skin and on your heart, and when you see victims, when you see people oppressed in India.
I'm going to stop you because we're running out of time. Can we just join back on the same link very quickly, and we'll continue this? This is live right now. I'm sorry, I have to do this. Can you just join back on the link, please?
From the link?
Yeah.
Recording in progress.
And I realized with time that it was not doing it was doing there, that you can live peacefully, because when you're inside that job and in your job, when you do it with passion, with honesty, and when you feel the pain of people whom you're talking about their oppression, or about how they are living, and even if there is no war, even I'm not only talking about war conflict, which is horrible. The war is horrible by default, it's horrible. But even when you hear stories from people, from citizens who are having a horrible life or a horrible pain just because the governance is not a good governance, you feel very sorry for them. And if you are sensitive, if you are you have passion, and you want to help them, and of course you can't do this
Recording
alone.
in progress.
You only can tell their stories, and this is our job. Actually, what does a journalist do? He tells stories, or she tells stories. I don't know why we keep saying he. We tell stories, and she tells the stories. So when you tell a story, and the story is really painful, because in the region where I cover stories are not all joyful. And even around the world, if you put the French TV or the American TV, you will always get to hear bad stories, which is another subject there, why we keep reporting on bad stories. For me, there are good stories that we report, and that is very, very important. But my priority here as a journalist who covers political and economical subjects in the Middle East, for example, my priority is not to say, like, for example, this guy had invented this or that, or there is an award here, or there is a party there, or there is a very big painter who had this beautiful paint. It's very important, this. And I really admire people who do that. And sometimes I envy them. But for me, my priority when I chose journalism and started working, I said there are priorities. My priority was to make people's life, citizens' life better through the privilege of giving them information that can lead them to make better choices and to know more about people who are governing them. And it hurt me so much to see that the government is taking, not giving. The governors or the leaders in the Middle East, or the dictators or the corrupted politicians in Lebanon. We don't have a dictatorship in Lebanon, but you have corrupted politicians. And unless you do a good journalism and you tell the Lebanese people, guys, those people are stealing your money, those people are corrupted, they will keep voting for them. They will keep choosing them. They don't realize that by choosing those people, they are choosing the bad quality of life, and they are choosing the bad future even for their children. So my role as a journalist was not to, I do not want to interfere in their choices. I just want to give them information that make them choose or that make them go for better choices or choices that keep their life safe and in a better, to live in a better way. The life standard can keep better at all levels, in education, in schools and hospitals. Everything will get better if you have a good governance, and you need good politicians to do a good governance. So that was my aim, my goal at the beginning. And then the more you dig and the more you find that there are more corruption, more to tell, more hidden stories, and the more you dig and the more you discover how corrupted they are, the more they want to get rid of you. So either they assassinate you. In Lebanon, they there are many, or also they killed many journalists. And it's not the Lebanese regime. It's it's very complicated. It's the Syrian regime who was controlling Lebanon. And each time you talk about dictatorship in Syria, because in Lebanon they talk more, they get rid of him or her. And if they don't kill you physically, they will kill you. Now there is a new way of killing. They kill you virtually. It's a character assassination. And that happened with me because I was covering the Gulf stories and the Middle East stories. And when Saudi Arabia had this blockade against Qatar and they wanted to close Al Jazeera, and the Emiratis as well, I was covering those subjects on air. I had my program, I had guests, I was asking questions, and that they didn't like that. But I didn't go to an embassy or a consulate, so they couldn't shop me like they did with Jamal Khashoggi. So what they did is that they shopped me virtually on Twitter, on internet. And until now, they when they hacked my phone and they stole those pictures, the pictures are very normal pictures. It's a simple video where I was swimming in the building where I live. But what they did is that they doctored the images. So it's their way of killing your character, killing your reputation. And they know that Al Jazeera audience is, they're not, they have a certain image in their head of me, and I don't post normally private pictures, or they know nothing about me because I'm focused on my job. I don't like to talk about myself. I rather like to talk about people or about stories or about politicians. So people didn't have an idea of that I am a normal person. I do wear my swimsuit, but because, you know, those are Muslim societies, they're not used to have a news presenter who is in a swimsuit. And of course I do wear it, and I don't mind if I see if somebody sees me in a swimsuit, but this is my private life. Why should they be interested in that? But those governments, they knew that when you put those pictures and you doctor them and you relate them to a prostitution story, they will, you know, distract my audience. And the audience, rather than thinking about the questions I'm asking, rather than having the message I'm giving to people when I talk about facts, about news, about political problems, every time they will see me, they will remember the picture, they will start imagining my body, my swimsuit. They will start to think about something else, because they never saw me but with a jacket. I mean, they never saw my skin at all. So now, when you show them suddenly Ghada and a swimsuit, it will be like, wow, and that you will distract their attention to something else. Not that I care that I'm in a swimsuit, but what happens is that they want my audience to think about my sexual life, about me as a woman, about sex, about prostitution, about all these, you know, misogynistic and sexist style of campaigning on Twitter, and that's how they keep.
It's a distraction tactic. We all know that. It's a distraction tactic.
Yeah.
It's changing the topic.
It's also very strategic. So now the attacks have, I think earlier journalists' physical safety used to be, we're getting followed. What if somebody throws acid on you in South Asia? That's very common. What if you meet with an accident? What if you're shot? What if you're killed? We've seen that happen to an Indian journalist who was covering the Taliban just last year. You know, so it used to be those. Now, whoever is attacking is very much aware. We need to strategically break the confidence of the woman, expose her. They believe the honor of a woman. Anyway, we're talking very patriarchal, sexist countries and government, and also society, no matter which part of the world that we come from. So the underlying message is, let's crush her. And Kiran, as you were mentioning, that when you worked with journalists who are impacted, the effect that it has on the mental health, and also the expectation that you continuously have to put out a brave front and do your job. You're a freaking machine, basically, that nothing affects you, nothing impacts you, but in the background, it is crushing you. It's a real disease. Stress, trauma, PTSD is real. It's neurological, it's physical. For women, it's also hormonal. I know a lot of journalists who develop diabetes or PCOS, or, you know, have fainted at work due to, you know, other physical issues that they've had. Why are we still not normalizing health and prioritizing health over the job and over the work that we do? Why is this expectation that a woman has to be strong, or even a man for that matter? Male journalists don't want to show that they're tired, that they're weak. They're always macho and masculine and doing the job, and women have to put up and keep up with that equivalence 24/7. And if you do, then you're not a good journalist. So I'm going to stop talking right now. But
there's a lot here.
Yeah.
But can I want to touch a little bit about the reality of, you know, what happens, mental health, what is this, what is trolls and stuff. There's a reality that we don't talk about often unless you're really doing your research. It's not in the mainstream. First thing, you said something about men, macho. Let's address that. Let's address the question, why are we not prepared? Why are we not creating these systems that are accessible to every female journalist or male journalist when they are targeted? And we don't even talk about LGBTQ journalists. They are kind of invisible, but they get targeted, but their issues are invisible, but they're targeted immediately. And there is maybe 1% if there is any systems for them. So, you know. There are very small ecosystems where LGBTQ journalists have access to anything. So, first of all, your comment on, you know, male macho, I would say with no doubt that actually women do a much better job in being resilient and going back to work. And I have a, I think that it is in the evolution that women have been, women and, women give birth. And I think it's in our body that we're able to adapt, we're able to respond better and all that. I will say that what women are facing right now in journalism or politics or human rights, when they get trolled or targeted, the way we get targeted or trolled, I do not
Recording in
think that
progress.
first of all, I want to say women are handling it much better, and I don't think that men are macho. It's a concept that we have, and that concept comes from our social evolution of thought that men are superior and women are not. The story is very different, and that goes back into the body. This is all if you start reading on how humans evolved, human body, mental health, you will find evidence of all of these things. That women have more resilience and so on, and they don't have to. If women don't have to deal with this, they can use their resilience into creativity and growth of a better society. They can be the intelligent and creative part of the ecosystem that upholds our governments, that upholds our systems, including the media. And we are seeing that wherever we see more women leadership in journalism, just let's talk about journalism or technology, wherever you're seeing more women leadership, not singular women leadership with a male-dominated organization, but if you look at organizations where you have majority of women leadership and women working throughout the organization, you see better performance. So I just wanted to address the male-female dynamic here, but one other thing that I want to talk about is, let's step back a little bit and look at journalists as human beings. And let's look at those who harass journalists as human beings as well, because at the end of the day, we are all human bodies. So let's try to understand what is happening with humans. First of all, I think that this online trolling and this ability for governments to use the narrative against journalists and the reaction it produces, for example, trolling or the hatred towards journalists. Like before trolling, there was still hatred. Like when it's almost been a decade, but I'm originally a Pakistani journalist, and before online trolling happened, we faced different challenges where we were called Indian agents, and so I think, like Sania, you might know a little bit about that. Like it has always existed, the opposition against the journalist. And where does that come from? This is basically the us versus them mentality. And in human evolution, what has happened is that as humans made progress, industrialization, and we made progress into a society where we could live in civilization, the human instinct of like us versus them, where we used to oppose animals and we had enemies, which were not humans. Right? So we have those instincts, and we have that design in our mind, in our mental, in our brain, still sustains that. The fear, for example, what happens when you are afraid, when you get triggered, the flight response, and all that. So all of that, like, we still have the same biology. And what we are seeing in politicization, polarization, division of countries, what we're seeing is that really selfish people who really want to, they do it for power or whatever reason that is. They use these tools that rile up masses of human and trigger them against another human being. And so this is essentially why senseless. Why is polarization or division so senseless? Why is the opposition always so senseless? It's because their physical response is triggered when they oppose somebody, and they think that then what happens is the process of dehumanization. And in that dehumanization, they dehumanize, say, for example, Ghada was dehumanized when somebody shared her photos, and then those people started attacking her. They did not see her as a fellow human being. They saw her as opposition, as someone they should be afraid of. So because she's called whatever, whatever conspiracies against journalists. Sometimes a journalist is the enemy of society or democracy or whatever. That triggers the response of fear in the troll. And that's why they troll so bad. So I want to say to the trolls to understand that they're not doing themselves a favor by not dehumanizing another human being. Now, I know that we have very little time. I have my clock ticking for another meeting as well, but I just wanted to show you something I draw while Ghada was talking. When Ghada, you were talking about Shireen and Sania, when earlier you were discussing like the gut and everything, like how essentially human body gets affected. We are biological body. So I just drew this. I don't know if you guys can see the brain. So this is the human brain, obviously, and this is the most.
Oh, you're really
part.
good at that.
That's the amygdala, right? And so this is the part of your brain that stores emotion. It stores love. It stores hatred. It stores trauma. It stores memories and emotion. So this is where we're able to. This is the part of the brain that stores everything, and then your brain processes things like love, compassion, empathy, and hatred, and trauma and fear. But when it is true, there's a part of it that is a fear response in this amygdala, and if that gets activated, if this part, the fear response here, gets activated, it goes back into your spinal cord and the rest of your brain and takes over, and it destabilizes the brain, and it goes down to your body. So it goes in your physiological system. It's connected to your spine. It's connected to your brain operations of logic. Other parts of your brain, you're unable to use them. You're unable to use your brain, any part of your brain, if this fear part of your brain is activated. And this happens on both sides. It happens for those who are targeting you, and it also happens to those who are being targeted. So your brain kind of, gets compromised. Unless, like Ghada said, you have to practice and experience. Why is journalist experience so important? Is that with time, humans learn to process it and then find a way to navigate. And that's the best thing about being a human being, is that we are very good at adapting, right? So all I want to say is that, that we both should understand, those who are being targeted and those who are targeting other human beings, that first of all, let's not dehumanize. Understand that we are human beings, and that it would directly, like you were asking about younger journalists or any journalists who are there for a long time or facing trauma should understand that to be prepared.
From your calendar, CPJ interview starts in 10 minutes.
All right, Kiran. We know what you're doing next. But
and then just last thing I want to say, sorry about that. And then last thing I just want to say, to be prepared, to strengthen yourself, to be able to manage that stress, to be aware that it's happening, it's triggering. And the moment you'll tell your brain that it's triggering your stress response, your fear response, you'll be able to control it. It has very real challenges. If you get consistently attacked and if you're consistently under stress, whether it's online trolling or physical violence or a combination of those, it can trigger your childhood trauma. It can affect a lot of other things. It could make you, things like journalists complain about a lot of things, paranoia. They leave their job. They want to do something else. A lot of different responses that we have to that stress is because if you're not able to control that stress, it can get triggered and it affects our lives in reality. And I think that with good training, good support systems, understanding how it's affecting you, awareness, journaling, meditation, having community, that can really help journalists come back to it and always be like something that we always, Ghada has worked on frontlines as well. One thing we always tell frontline journalists, that go with somebody, don't be on your own. And I think that applies everywhere. Just if you're a journalist, go with somebody wherever you're going. Even if you're going online, just always have your support system in whatever metaphorical way or physical way.
All right. On that note,
Kiran, thank you. And I personally, I learned something that I didn't know before. And I wanted to add one more thing that I remembered now about the stress and the brain. I read once that each time you read something bad about you, an insult or a bully or harassment online, it has the same effect as when, for example, you're drinking very hot coffee or any hot liquid, and you get burned with it on your hand. It's the same thing. The same part of the brain reacts. I mean, the same part which reacts to the burning, to the burn feeling when you have a hot liquid on your skin. That's the same part of the brain that reacts when you read those online harassment about you. And it's true, because at the beginning, because people around you keep telling you, oh, grow a thick skin, it's nothing, it's virtual, this is not serious, it's only comments from accounts that are not even real. But still, it hurts, and it leaves an impact, and you need a very long training to deal with it the proper way.
Yeah, and thank you so much, Ghada, for saying that. That's absolutely right. There's so many anecdotes, but just briefly, I want to say that, first of all, it triggers the same response as holding a hot cup of coffee. So and I want to explain why that happens. It's amazing why that happens, because we think we live in a divided world, but humans are designed. We are designed for a community. We cannot survive without community. In our evolutionary system, we cannot survive without community. So I want to tell you one more detail about that. So for example, when you see someone who does not like you, who says something rude about you, and that triggers that response in your brain, what is really happening is that your brain is seeing that and saying, oh my God, this other human said this about me. It hurts. And it hurts because we evolved into bodies and biological beings to love other human beings. So when we see another human being saying something hateful to us, it hurts us. And that is why it triggers that response. And slowly, as you know, physically, when you keep on holding a hot cup of coffee, of course, your skin will get thicker. That's why it's physically a thing that happens, and that obviously can happen to your brain too. But a thicker skinned person cannot navigate everything else that is being human. And that is why sometimes we need to balance both things. We need to be able to be strong and have thicker skin, but also have the softer skin that we are supposed to have.
Yes. Exactly. And on that note, we were supposed to have a 20-minute conversation, but we've gone over 45 minutes. But thank you, guys. This was really, I'm truly grateful that we managed to take the time out to talk, and we will continue these conversations offline and as we continue to do our works, because as both of you said, we need community, we need support system, and what we have is each other. And unless and until we don't continue to bring more women into this safe space, mental health is going to continue being a challenge, and in the world that we are living in is no longer a safe or a normal world where I wish it was all butterflies and unicorns, but it's not. So thank you so much. You are both very brave, very courageous, and you've inspired. I mean, when I read about what you've done, I knew I had to have this conversation, because your stories and your voices should be and must be reached out to as many journalists all over the world, because every single time a woman stands up for herself, it encourages other women to stand up for themselves. And that's what you both have done. So thank you so much for the work that you do, and also for coming on the Sania Farooqui show today.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And for those of you who tuned in, we had a minor glitch in between, but thank you for staying on. I hope that you will subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Spotify. And we will continue with our lives over the next couple of weeks. So please do stay tuned in. This is a new model that we are following. So please do support. We will, as I mentioned in one of my previous videos, will be announcing something very exciting very, very, something very exciting on the Sania Farooqui show very soon. So please do stay connected with us. I'm going to see you again next week. Thank you so much for watching. Okay.